Alright guys, welcome back. We have entered the software. As you can see, we got some segments, partitions, whatever you want to call them. And they might be a little bit confusing, if you're not familiar with them already. And also we got some tabs right up here, and we're going to start our work by discussing these tabs and their sub-items. Not all of them though. As I said in the previous session, in our introduction session, in this course we're going to cover the most important items and points that we might need when we want to create and edit a podcast. What we want to accomplish here is we're gonna learn how we can use the software in the best way possible. And on my half, I'm going to give you the instructions in the best way, as simple and as to the point as possible. So even if you are in a basic level, you would be able to comprehend everything completely. To be more precise, we're going to discuss about 70 maybe or even 80% of the sub-items in each tab. As you can see, first tab is File. It has some sub-items, New, Open, Recent, and so on. Let's talk about New first. As you can see, it has 3 parts. For example, the third one is CD layout, which we don't really need to discuss. 2 other segments are multi-track session and audio file. You know what, about the third part here, CD layout, we have actually talked about this in our previous tutorial, in our mini course tutorial. But here in this course, we don't really need to talk about it. So instead, let's discuss the other items. Let's start with audio file. Well, obviously, we can use this item for creating audio files, or for example, when you want to record something or set up a recording on something. And by the way, this is just an introduction, and later on, we're going to discuss this item even more further and in more details. Next item would be multi-track session. We actually use this item for the most parts of our works. For example, let's say we have several voices, audio files, recordings, and so on. And using this item, we would be able to specify the order that we want to use for playing the main file. Alright guys, the next item is Open. We can use this item for, you can say, for opening the files and projects that we have saved before and continue working on them. Okay, what else? Next up we have Open Recent. Here you would have a view, or actually an access to the projects that you have worked on previously. Now, as you can see, we have some deactivated items here as well. For example, we have Close and also Close All. We can obviously use these items for closing the open projects, which we don't have any here yet. Or, for example, we can close down the unused medias using this item here. Alright, next item, which is quite important, is Save. Well, obviously, we use this item to save the files that we would work on or we would create. We use this item to save the files, save such files in our system, and then we have Save As. It somehow does the same, but this time we would be able to specify a path for saving the files and projects in the system. Then after that, we can use Save Selection As to save only the selected files. Then we have Save All, which we can use for saving everything that we got, for example, in this viewport. Alright, then the next item is not that important again, so let's move on to the next segment, Import. Using Import, we would be able to add the files that we might need to our current project, for example. You know what, let me give you a visual demonstration here as well. For example, I'm going to import this track into my file, and now the closing items would be activated here as well. Now I can, for example, close this. See? The file got deleted. Alright, let me give you another example. Let me import another file. Right. For example, something like this. And yeah, let's continue our work. The next item that we can discuss is Export. And this item is actually one of the most important parts of our entire work. We can specify a file first, and then we can create any kind of export that we want, with any kind of format that we want to. And again, we're going to talk about this item even more. We're going to circle back to it later on. And yeah, that is basically it for all of the important items in the File tab. Let's move on to the next tab, which is Edit. As you can see, we have so many different items and segments here. For example, we got Undo, with its shortcut key, Control Z, or we have redo, for example, Control Shift Z. All right, let's see what else we get here. We have repeat last command with a shortcut key, Control R. Obviously, we use this command for repeating the commands that we have used. All right, then we have some tools, as you can see here, with their shortcut keys as well. By the way, guys, shortcut keys are quite essential in our field of work because they would help us increase our speed and add a lot of pace to our work. I mean, in other words, having a good speed is quite essential in our field of work. And it doesn't matter if you're working on our own project or we are working on a project for others. So pay attention to all of the shortcuts here. I mean, try to learn them by heart. For example, for move, we have V. For razor, we have R, as you can see. And also, sometimes we can actually add our own shortcut keys. And this is actually another important factor or concept which you need to be aware of, and we're going to talk about it in more detail later on. Anywho, let's go back to this viewport here. I'm going to do a double click on this file to open it, and then also I'm going to play it. Yeah, this would be our file, as you can see. Now, if I go back to this tab, editing tools would be activated for me. For example, we have time selection. All right, let me do something in multi-track session real quick. Then I'm going to try to elaborate later on. All right, now let's go through the editing tools that we have here. For example, first off, we have move. I can use this item to move through this file, as you can see. Then I can use the next item, which is razor, to cut the file in any way that I want. And after that, for example, I can activate the move command, this time using V. Then do something like this, for example. Then the next item would be slip with the shortcut key Y. Let's say we have used, for example, razor to create a specific section. And now you want to move through that particular section, or you want to move something in that section. I mean, for example, as you can see, I'm moving these sound waves around in this section here. You know what, to be honest, this isn't that useful. It's not that important. Alright, the rest of the items here are deactivated right now, so we're gonna circle back to them later on. Alright, let's see what else we have here. We have enable channels, set current clipboard. We're not gonna discuss these either. And then we have these general items here, for example, cut, copy, paste, and so on. I'm sure that you're already familiar with them. And as you can see, we have the shortcut keys here as well. For example, for cut, we have Control X. Then we have Control C for copy. Let me give you a quick demonstration. For example, Control C, then Control V to paste this down here. Now, Control Z to undo this, for example. Or even Control Shift Z to redo the command. You know, these items and commands are quite basic and rudimentary, and I'm sure that you're already familiar with all of them. This is why I'm trying to move past them quite rapidly. And along the way, if there was any questions regarding them or any points to add, I mean, any complimentary points, we're going to stop, add the points, or answer the questions. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that don't worry about them. Alright, so let's move on. The next item that we can talk about here would be, for example, delete, maybe. And you can find its shortcut key on the keyboard, the delete key on the keyboard. Then we have rename. Well, obviously, you can rename the files as you want. You can find the names in the file's properties. For example, I'm going to omit this part of the name and go with Apollo. See, the selected file got renamed. Now I'm going to select this one. And then try renaming this from the Properties tab again. And by the way, we're going to talk about these tabs later on. I mean, for example, the Properties tab. Next up, we have Select. First off, we have Select All. We can use this to select everything that we have in our viewport. I mean, all the files. Then we have Deselect All. Oh, and by the way, we have Control A as the shortcut key for Select All and Control Shift A for deselecting everything. And then we have some other additional items down here. For example, we have all clips in selected track. You know what, this item again is not that useful for us, so I'm not really gonna focus on talking about it here. Let's just move past it. I mean, we're gonna circle back to this one later on if needs be. Alright. Next up, we have insert and its sub-items. The most important sub-item here would be insert into multi-track session. Alright, next up we have the marker. Marker is quite an interesting item to use. Using this item, we would be able to mark out a specific part of a file. Somehow it is like adding bookmarks to a file. And also, this item has its own particular shortcut key as well, which is M. I mean, if I press M right now, this marker would be added to the file, and it is specified by marker 1, as you can see. And I would also be able to move this marker around and set it wherever I want to. Well, let's say, for example, I'm playing this file, and then I decide to add a marker here, for example. Okay? Oh, and by the way, markers have their own specific tab, which we're going to discuss later on. Next item would be zero crossings, which is deactivated, as you can see, so I'm just gonna move past it for now. Then after that we have snapping. I guess it would be quite easier to show you what it does, so let me just do that. We have S as its shortcut key. Right now it is activated. I'm gonna press S to deactivate it again. Now if I try, for example, attaching these two files, as you can see, it won't be quite easy. I mean, they would constantly collide with each other. Now if I press S again, the snap would work somehow like a magnet in between these two files. Yeah, and as a result, I would be able to attach these two files quite more easily. And yeah, this is basically what snap and its shortcut key, I mean the S key, does for us. Alright, and after that, down here we have two more important items: keyboard shortcuts and preferences. Now when we click on keyboard shortcuts, for example, this schematic keyboard would appear for us, and as you can see here, we got so many different items and options. This item is extremely helpful and interesting. Now about these two last items, I mean keyboard shortcuts and preferences or settings, they actually need their own particular and separate session, so we're gonna talk about them later on in our future sessions in the course more completely. So for now, just know that these are quite important. Alright, let's move to the next tab, which is multi-track.